So, moving on to video number 2. Another thing I've been doing lately is I read a lot of books. I enjoy reading. I'm actually wearing a t-shirt today that actually says book. I don't know if you can see it. Stand up. It actually says book nerd on it. But yeah, I am obsessed with books. But yeah, I was reading a book recently about an artist called Helen Allingham. I don't know if any of you have heard of her. She's long deceased, but she was a very popular artist in Victorian times. The peak of her popularity was around, the late end of the Victorian period, actually. I should say probably more Edwardian times, because the peak of her popularity was sort of around the peak of her popularity was around 1900, the year before Queen Victoria died, so it was more Edwardian times than Victorian times that she was popular. But she was well known for her paintings of cottages in Surrey, the county of Surrey in southern England, where she herself often holidayed in the summer, and later on she actually had a house there. But she was in the idealist school of art. She was very much a romantic. The paintings that her paintings didn't really portray rural England as it actually was. They sort of portrayed a mythological bygone era that arguably never even existed. Nice cottage scenes. She didn't portray any of the poverty or any of the kind of grime associated with rural living. It was all very idolised, very sanitised, mythologised, romanticised, but nonetheless, very nice art for all that. It doesn't matter that it was idolised, I don't think. The point is she did make some very good art. She was a watercolourist. She died in 1926, aged 78. Her surname, by the way, comes from her husband, because at the age of 25 she married a 50-year-old poet, William Allingham, who happened to be a friend of the poet laureate Tennyson. There's a massive age gap. She was 25 and her husband was 50. He was Irish, William Allingham, and a poet. And he also moved in pre-Raphaelite circles, so quite a few of her friends were among the pre-Raphaelites as well. Tragically, 2 of Helen's siblings died. One girl, aged 3, she died tragically of diphtheria, which also killed Helen's dad, who was a surgeon. Thankfully, we don't have that disease anymore to contend with because of vaccination. Interestingly, by the way, my grandmother's sister, called Peggy, died of diphtheria when she was 3. That would have been in the 1920s. It's a disease that isn't to be found in the UK anymore. The last case in the UK was in the 1970s, but it does still happen in some parts of the world where they don't have vaccination coverage, or they don't have so much vaccination coverage. So it is still a problem in some parts of the world, but because in the developed world at least, children and young teenagers get vaccinated against it as babies and as young teens again, and boosters, so it's no longer a threat in the UK, but it was a horrible disease. It's known as the strangler. It's caused by a bacterium, releases a toxin, and basically a membrane grows and can actually strangle you to death, like quite literally. It's a horrible disease. But yeah, so two of Helen's siblings died. One girl, aged 3, of diphtheria, and also her 17-year-old sister Louisa died of spinal TB. Helen was one of 7 kids. One theory is that part of the reason why she married the gentle Irish poet William was that he was old enough to be a parent, and maybe it was the loss of her parents who were early in her teens that possibly drew Helen to him. Maybe I was seeking out a sort of like father figure, but that's just one explanation, because obviously there was a massive age gap. Helen started out by doing illustrations and reports for magazines before she became a watercolourist. But after marriage, Helen had to give up her magazine work because it was seen as unseemly for a woman to be working while married. She was very much influenced by the artist Frederick Walker. and very much influenced by the Surrey countryside. As I say, she had rented a cottage near Guildford to spend her summers, and she later on got a house there herself. In 1881, Helen and William permanently moved to a hamlet in Surrey near Hazelmere called Sandhills. But it wasn't a cottage, it was actually the largest house there. But it was built of the traditional red brick of a Surrey cottage. Her house, in fact, was 10 years old by the time she bought it. It had a very large garden, which she transformed into a colourful array of old-fashioned plants, for example, roses, wallflowers, lilies, etc. Cornflowers. Gertrude Jekyll, Gertrude Jekyll, well-known artist and also garden designer. She lived near Godalming, and Gertrude Jekyll became a friend of Helen's. Her daughter Evie had learning disabilities of some description. I was thinking she might possibly be autistic, although obviously back in those days, we didn't have the diagnosis, but she definitely had learning challenges. And it was rather sad, actually, that Evie, her daughter, Helen sort of never really accepted. She never really accepted that her daughter had these learning challenges. And her favourite child, she had 3 children in total, her favourite child was her youngest, Henry, that she absolutely adored and doted on. But she kind of pretty much disowned Evie. She could never really accept that her daughter had learning challenges. And her daughter, by the way, was actually quite a talented artist herself, and some of her paintings quite similar to that of her mother's. But tragically, her daughter actually ended up in a lunatic asylum. So back in those days, they had lunatic asylums, lived out her days in a lunatic asylum, which is rather tragic when you think about it. A very pretty little girl. There are actual pictures of her as well. She only really took to drawing and was slow to learn anything else. Her favourite child, as I said, was her younger Henry William. She was also a friend of the illustrator Kate Greenaway, who was also a friend. As I say, much as Thomas Hardy did in his Wessex novels, Helen looked back nostalgically to a mythical pastoral age, setting at 1840s. The days were always sunny, rose-cheeked cottages living close to nature. But as I say, it was all mythologised. She was a member of the Idealist School. Members of the Idealist School were watercolourists, influenced by Frederick Walker, romantic country subjects. The paintings were realistic, but they represented an ideal. Helen painted those cottages which she believed had once possessed thatched roofs, and then she rethatched the cottages in her paintings. Even if they no longer contained thatch, she would rethatch them. Helen sought to portray each cottage as she thought it had once been. Most cottages appear in isolation in her pictures, despite having close neighbours in reality. The old-fashioned flowers represent what she believed cottage gardens had once been like. For example, more flowers than there would typically be in a modern vegetable-dominated garden. She tended to use professional models in her pictures, and she only rarely used locals. And they're usually young women and girls that are her favourites. Only very rarely do you see men or boys in her picture, and very rarely do you see old people. It's mainly young women and girls. And she often included animals in her pictures, but usually small animals. For example, birds on the roof, chickens on the paths, cats, often kittens. Larger animals like horses and dogs were very rare. So that's a little bit about her, and this is the book, as I say, Helen Allingham's England, an idyllic view of rural life. I do really like the pictures in here. This is quite an old book, by the way. It was actually published in 1990. It's a sort of biography with pictures of her. A biography with pictures of, or prints of Helen's work. So this is one of my favouriteest ones. I don't know if you can see. I do really like that one. That's one of my favourites. It's the Clothesline, which was painted in 1879, employed the London model Mrs. Stewart for the main figure. John Ruskin, the art critic, he criticised the picture for the coloured handkerchief, which he said introduced a jarring note to decomposition, but I actually really like it. It's one of my favourite paintings. That sort of thing, like that. Like, gardens that are full of flowers. It's all very cottagecore. How much I love cottagecore. Very cottagecore. I mean, you could say that this is the cottagecore par excellence, really. If you're going to be cottagecore, it has to start with this. Very cottagecore. As I say, it's all mythologised. It's romantic. But you sometimes need a little bit of romanticism in your life, I think. Just love these pictures, just really pretty. Let's find, there was another one. I was just trying to find these, like for example, woodland scenes. Just try and find to see if there are any. Yeah, I like this one here, the one of the sheep. I do really like that one. That just gives you an idea of some of the pictures in this book. So it's all cottagecore, Helen Allingham's Rural England. Yeah, I think I just need that sort of thing at the moment, because life is just so crap, isn't it, with COVID, and my life's so very narrow at the moment. I just need some kind of escape. So I think that's probably why I'm getting a little bit obsessed with kind of like those sort of like otherworldly realms and romantic art and stuff like that, just because it's fulfilling a psychological need right now, where I need a bit of escapism, you know, because life is so very narrow, and it just helps you stop thinking about COVID and all the grime of society, where you can just kind of like escape, you know, through lovely pictures. So let me know if any of that appeals to you. I'd be interested to know. Thank you for watching.